At this time, I would like to welcome our first speaker today, Kindy Cox, Vice President with Public Strategies.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Kindy Cox, and I am a Vice President at Public Strategies, and I bring you greetings from sunny Oklahoma. Thank you for making every effort to be here with us today. I hope that good things are on the horizon. It's actually supposed to be 70 degrees here in Oklahoma today, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. And that this week's SRAE topical training event will be a bright spot for all of us. So before I share some guidance about your participation in this week's training, let me make some brief remarks about Public Strategies' role. For those of you who may not be familiar, Public Strategies is the Training and Technical Assistance, or TTA, contractor for this grant program. Along with our subcontractor Ascend, we organize topical training such as this one. We also provide individualized TTA via email, phone, and video conferencing, TA resources like webinars, tip sheets, and e-updates, which you could find on the Exchange, articles and blog posts also on the Exchange website. So please make sure you are accessing those resources because they are designed for you as you implement and improve your programs. Okay, so let's talk about you. The attendees at this training are representative of the family of SRAE grant programs, including the General Departmental SRAE, Title V State SRAE, and Title V Competitive SRAE programs. And the primary focus of all of these programs is to teach youth how to voluntarily refrain from non-marital sexual activity and other risky behaviors in order to experience optimal health for themselves. However, we know that some of you have been doing this work for a long time, while some of you may be newly funded. So this topical training is organized by tracks so that you can get information and training that is most applicable to your specific needs. So let's go through those tracks. Track 1, Foundational Strategies for Implementing SRAE with Success, is designed primarily for new grantees. And that may be grants that were awarded in 2020, or perhaps you are a continuing grant, but you have a variety of new staff. And this track is comprised of what we hope are to be engaging sessions that highlight foundational strategies for implementation, required core components, including legislative criteria, and practical applications that have helped create highly successful SRAE programs across the country. Attendees will hear from experts on a variety of topics specific to the administration of these grant programs. And each day will end with a new field talk session that will allow grantees to network and exchange ideas on the topics presented. Now, track 2, Exploring the Critical Domains of Adolescent Thriving, offers primarily refunded grantees the opportunity to expand on curriculum topics with a closer look at the key domains that enhance well-being and thriving among youth. It will provide insight into building social capital for youth, strengthening self-efficacy through creativity, and will share updated trend data on the impact of the STI epidemic and how social and emotional learning, or SEL, is reinforced through SRAE's holistic approach. And again, just like the other track, each day will end with a new field talk session that will allow grantees to network and exchange ideas. So as a note, each day will open with a joint session before we break into those track sessions. All applicable Zoom links have been sent to you and also are available on the schedule at a glance. Additionally, at the end of each day, a link to that day's feedback survey will be available in the chat box. So be sure and check there because we very much value your feedback and want to make sure that we get a form from each one of you. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Division Director Risa Matthew to deliver some opening remarks on behalf of the Family and Youth Services Bureau. Thank you from me and have a great training. Risa?
Thank you, Kendi. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. And welcome to the first SRAE Topical Training Session of 2021. And as Kendi mentioned, I'm Risa Matthew, and I serve as the Director of the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program. And as we began 2021 with a fresh perspective, we now have a new administration that supports the federal government's continued commitment to all underserved communities. We're also excited about the decision of legislators to extend the APP programs through 2023. As you know, APP's program's goal is to support each of you as you work to implement programming to support youth towards attaining optimal health as they make healthy decisions to avoid non-marital sexual activity and other risky behaviors. I know it's disappointing not to be with each of you in person, but we are once again able to gather virtually to work together with the goal of continuing to improve upon all of the great work being done and the opportunity to welcome a much broader audience of our SRAE grantees through this virtual format. Of course, we at FISB certainly appreciate each of you dedicating your time over the next 3 afternoons to enhance your strategies in how to serve the youth in your communities. And appropriately, the theme of this virtual topical training is enhancing purpose, passion, and results with concurrent tracks that focus on youth success and how you can help adolescents thrive. We've put together some great materials for both new SRAE grantees, as well as those of you who are continuing your efforts or veteran grantees, and hope that you're excited to take what you learned back to your programs, your youth, and your communities. I'm especially looking forward to the field talk sessions at the end of each day. As Kendi mentioned, these times are built for networking and sharing of ideas, and we hope will further solidify the training materials and reveal suitable applications for them. In fact, as you're talking with your peers and colleagues in these networking sessions, think also of sharing your successes, new ideas, and strategies you're incorporating into your SRAE program with a wider group of your APP grantees by using the comment wall on the exchange. And I would be remiss if I did not touch on this, but I know for the last 11 months, we have faced this COVID-19 pandemic, not really knowing what the future would bring or how long we may be in this public health emergency. However, during that time, there's been no shortage of effort and commitment from you, our grantees, to adapt and overcome, and the way you manage those challenges that you have and continue to face. We also know that your program participants have also been facing these same hurdles, but with a different lens than you and me. So as you begin today, look for ways you can leverage this training in your day-to-day interaction to help your program participants overcome individually, but also to support your colleagues across the nations as we work through these times together. And I know that you've seen a lot of new faces, and this is a really great note for us and an accomplishment that we have our APP team is growing, and we have new federal staff that have come on board. Not new to you, I think, is Debbie Powell, who is our acting associate commissioner and our deputy associate commissioner. We also have Labrita White, who is one of our program managers, Vernay Martin, who is our second program manager for the APP program. And then we have our federal project officers, Jessica Johnson, Christina Zakor, Tena Gabretsadik, Ricky Richard, Alexandria Washington, Tanya Matthews, Letitia Winston, Patrice Moss, and Latonia Coriat. And we also have Tarshika Thompson, who's our executive assistant, and Owen Burns, who's our communications manager. And I have to express my gratitude to them because I could not do the work I do without this wonderful multidisciplinary team that I have the pleasure of working with. I'd also like to recognize our SRAE training and technical assistance partner, Public Strategies, for their partnership and expertise and all the hard work you've done in preparing for and hosting this event. And then I'd also like to extend my thanks and gratitude to all of our grantees. And I think there's roughly over 319 registered. Your compassion, caring, and dedication are manifested in the way you impact young people's lives. And just to highlight one of the things that Kendi said, I just want to have one more request of you to please be sure to complete your participant surveys at the end of each session. We usually use this information to inform how we continue to provide training and technical assistance, as well as our conference. So we encourage you to do that. And so once again, I thank you for your time, your commitment, your dedication to your communities and the youth you serve. And so I'd like to turn it back over to Megan.
Thank you, Risa, and thank you, Kendi, for your opening remarks. Now I would like to welcome our moderator for this first session, Marianne Mozak, President and CEO with Ascend.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you, Risa and Kendi, for really inspiring remarks to open this training session. Really appreciate everything that you've said. And welcome to all of you for joining the training session for the next 3 days and to this opening session. And the title is, of course, Setting the Stage for Youth Thriving, Harvard's Human Flourishing Program. And we are pleased that we have two presenters that will be joining us for this session to present. I'd like to introduce the first presenter, Dr. Matthew Lee. Dr. Lee is the Director of Empirical Research for Harvard's Human Flourishing Program. He's also a distinguished visiting scholar of health, flourishing, and positive psychology at Stony Brook University's Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics. Dr. Lee's current research explores topics such as benevolent service to others, organizational compassion capability, and the integration of social science and the humanities. So welcome, Dr. Lee. Next, joining Dr. Lee will be Jonine McKenzie. Jonine is an RN, and she's currently the president and founder of the Center for Relationship Education located in Colorado. She is known throughout the nation as a subject matter expert and consultant in the areas of relationship education, adolescent health, and human flourishing. And I do encourage all of you to look on the training website where you'll find a more extensive bio of each of the presenters today. So make sure you see that and read about some of the wonderful things that our two presenters are involved in. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm delighted to be with you today, and thanks to everyone who organized this. And thanks also to Jonine, who I've gotten to know through our community of practice at the Human Flourishing Program. And I will put into the chat box our website for our program, and you can navigate the website and find out information about our community of practice and about some of the measures that we offer. They're all in the public domain with the Creative Commons license, and some of the research and interventions that we're involved in. So I hope that you'll check it out. It's a great joy to talk about human flourishing with you. And this is a topic that is on the minds of leaders from government organizations, private industry, nonprofits, churches, schools, basically every sector, and not just in the United States, across the world. Leaders are really beginning to broaden their appreciation for not only whatever the goals are of their specific organization and perhaps promoting some wellness or well-being along the way, but looking at complete well-being or flourishing for all people, people that they serve, members of their organizations, and the broader stakeholders throughout the world. So we can think about flourishing in a lot of different ways. And so I'll sort of set the table, and then Jonine will go more specific with some of the points. I think it's helpful for us to step back and imagine, what is it that we mean by flourishing? Is it just flourishing individuals? Or is it the intersection between individuals and the community, and perhaps even the broader planet and ecosystem? So we can think about getting by or surviving or coping with unhappy circumstances, surviving in the desert, or we can think about flourishing in a healthy ecosystem. So I asked this question, which contains a lot of components, just to get us thinking about this. In your life, what person, organization, and broader set of institutional arrangements most skillfully nurtures your growth, effectively reduces your unconstructive forms of suffering, allows you to make meaningful contributions and connections, and helps you to reveal your best possible self? So we can flourish in the arid conditions of a desert, but we grow better with others in very healthy, nurturing soil. So this question is pointing to the broader institutional arrangements that help us to grow as full human beings. One way to get very interpersonal about this is to look at a question posed by the character Mr. Rogers, played here by Tom Hanks, in conversation with a rather cynical journalist who was trying to write an expose about him. And we can ask the question, how do we flourish? And one way to think about this is to take this exercise together. Take, as Mr. Rogers says, 1 minute to think about all the people who have loved you into being. 1 minute, I'll watch the time. So we'll actually do this. I've got the clock started. Think about all the people who have loved you into being. So it is helpful for us to remember and feel gratitude for others who have contributed to our complete well-being, have helped us to grow and thrive and flourish in so many ways. And it's a joyful thing to do. But of course, there's more to flourishing than that. And so we'll look at some additional ways of understanding flourishing. So Dan Gilbert in the Harvard Business Review said, if I had to summarize all the scientific literature on the causes of human happiness in one word, that word would be social. If I wanted to predict your happiness and could know only one thing about you, I wouldn't want to know your gender, religion, health, or income. I'd want to know about your social network, about your friends and family, and the strength of your bonds with them. So if we're thinking about the healthy soil that nurtures healthy plants, and we can think about happiness as one element of flourishing, then it is, of course, helpful to think about the people who have loved us into being. And that is important. But I would actually want to know these other things too when we're thinking about full flourishing. I would want to know some background about religion, because religion offers another kind of nurturance, another set of social relationships. I would want to know a lot more, and I would want to look at a lot more than just happiness. So it is important for us to pay attention to the conditions of the soil, but there's more in the soil than just our social relationships. And it is true, as Johann Hari says in his book, Lost Connections, that disempowering relationships are at the heart of poor health, physical, mental, and emotional health. So what are the nutrients in healthy soil? Well, it's interesting. I did some research when I was in graduate school on natural disaster areas. And it's interesting that meaningful stressors may actually enrich our soil by enabling warm connections and our own valued contributions. One of the great sources of suffering in the world is not being nurtured into being by others, not being loved into being by others. But an equally great source of suffering is not being able to see our love make a difference in the world. And a lot of times we want to provide support, but we're not as skillful at enabling people to support others as part of developing into this fully flourishing human being. So natural disasters, research shows, can release survivors from the social disaster of everyday life. So people say, well, I don't know my neighbors, or, you know, I sort of keep to myself or whatever. In a natural disaster, you can't do that. So we experience a lot of meaningless stress, a lot of separation and alienation, a lot of loneliness. Loneliness, of course, being as harmful to your health as smoking cigarettes, according to research. But in a natural disaster, we can be released into a deeper shared purpose, where deeply compassionate and meaningful paradises of unbroken solidarities can arise. So it's interesting when people come together around a shared purpose, how oftentimes some of the barriers that separate us seem to disappear, at least temporarily. The Japanese have a great word, kizuna, for the strong connections that emerge from addressing suffering together, these loving and compassionate bonds that are sometimes built. And the same thing happens in situations of war, combat. Even civilians who have been subjected to bombings and other kinds of things find within these very terrible circumstances deeper connections and more meaningful and purposeful contributions of their love, making a difference in the world. So I'm not advocating for warfare here, but I am making a sort of counterintuitive point that sometimes the social disaster of everyday life is in many ways worse than what we experience in natural disasters. So we can look at well-being and flourishing in a very broad framework. At the bottom here on the left side, we have this book, Toxic Emotions at Work, that show, I like this cover because it shows this wilting flower. And in a lot of organizations, deeply empathetic people have to do a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of emotional labor, and they tend to burn out. And we call this empathy fatigue. And so the conditions of the soil are very poor because the work of compassion is not distributed throughout the group in an equitable way. So there's this sort of wilting flower, and that's represented by the bottom of this figure developed by the Wellbeing in the Nation Network and other groups that are coming together to talk about flourishing on a national level, linking individual experiences of happiness and other forms of well-being with broader questions of equity and justice. And so if we are trapped in the bottom of this figure in an adversity economy, we're going to spend a lot of time and effort just meeting basic needs, reacting to crises, always putting out fires. But we haven't really addressed the underlying dynamic. Sorry, please go back to the previous one. We haven't really address the underlying dynamics of trauma and exclusion that keep us trapped in this adversity economy. The top part of this figure here starts with dignity and inclusion and asks, how do we create legacies for thriving and flourishing together, founded on these fundamental principles? And then how do we contribute systemically to the vital conditions that are listed here in the center of the top part of the figure that enable everyone to flourish in a situation of equity and justice. So I put, and I'll put this in the chat as well, our forthcoming volume, there it is, coming out with Oxford University Press. This is titled Measuring Well-Being, Interdisciplinary Perspectives from the Social Sciences and the Humanities. And this book is available for free download starting on March 18th. It's an open access volume, but bringing together scholars from the social sciences and the humanities to really debate what well-being is. And I would argue that it's important to look at individual flourishing and complete well-being at the individual level, but we have to become better stewards of the system, collectively creating the vital conditions that are rooted in dignity and inclusion and allow for everyone to flourish. Another helpful framework that I would offer you today is this comes from Donut Economics. And here the idea is that we're trying to meet human needs, which are represented in the middle of the donut here: peace and justice, education, health, energy, etc. And we don't want to fall short of meeting human needs. But in meeting human needs, we don't want to overshoot the ecological ceilings, contributing to climate change and pollution of various kinds. So we're talking about a balancing act. And how do we both enable all people to thrive without exception and still work within the ecological boundaries so that we're not leaving a harmful footprint on the ability of the world to sustain life itself. So that's increasingly the kind of conversation about flourishing that I'm part of, which has moved quite far beyond physical health for individuals or happiness for individuals and into linking the individual to the broader collective all the way up to the planet. So we have various multi-systemic models of flourishing or complete well-being. Ours is represented, our individual model here is represented on the left side, sort of looks like a spider web. And the point here is that we're not divorcing the outcomes: happiness and life satisfaction, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close social relationships, from the pathways: family, work, education, religious community. So these are just examples. But the point is that we recognize the deep integration of the individual within these more collective pathways. Some of you may be familiar with the blue zones model here in the center. The parts of the world where people seem to live to be like 100 years old, and they're healthy, good years. And what are the components of the lifestyle that contribute to good, healthy, long lives? Belongingness is the base of this pyramid. So creating a healthy social network, connecting with religion or spirituality, prioritizing family, but then eating wisely, having a sense of purpose, exercise, all of these things. So flourishing is really about an ecosystem, a well-being ecosystem, where a number of these factors come together to shape the individual's ability to grow and to thrive. And I like this circle diagram as well. It might be a little bit difficult to read, the type's a little bit small, but this comes to us from the International Multiple Sclerosis Federation. And it starts on the upper left here with the individual. This is me and my mental health and physical health, but it also looks at the connections between me and my immediate environment on the right side: education and learning, home and local community, finances and resources. And then it links those up to the macro level: national stability and security, culture, the economy, etc. So flourishing, if we want to really understand it holistically, would require that we look at the individual, the community, and the macro context, the nation or the region or the world. So what is flourishing? And we'll start at the individual level. And this is the definition that's outlined by the director of my program at Harvard, Tyler Vanderweel. And his article is available open access again from our website, as are a lot of our research papers. And next bullet, please. And he would say, I think quite reasonably, that flourishing is a state in which all aspects of a person's life are good. And we could call this complete well-being or thriving or something else. At the very least, this means doing or being well in the following 5 broad domains. The first is happiness and life satisfaction. The second is health, both mental and physical. The third is meaning and purpose. The fourth is character and virtue. And the fifth is close social relationships. So this is sort of a baseline consensus model. And so why do we start with this focus? And again, we're at the individual level. Each of these domains satisfies 2 criteria. The first is that they are ends in themselves. We pursue them for their own sake, not just to get something else. And the second is, and we've got some research on this, that they're nearly universally desired. Almost everybody would want these things. Now, this is not a complete model of flourishing. This is just sort of a starting point. So the next point is that we might, for religious people, for example, we might add communion with God or the transcendent. And the next point is that we would also want to consider financial and material stability, because without some baseline material stability, it's difficult to pursue these other 5 ends in themselves. So in fact, and in practice, we always, whenever possible, measure financial material stability as a domain of flourishing, because without it, at some level, and it will vary across groups, but at some level, that's necessary to consider when we're talking about these other domains. So we will actually talk about 6 domains, 5 of them being ends in themselves, and the 6th being sort of the means to an end. And there's Tyler's paper, which is available on our website as well. So just to take a look at how we've measured these domains and some of the average scores on a 10 scale, with 10 sort of being the highest possible value, we can look at, in the United States, this was a paper that I was involved with, looking at the change with COVID. So prior to the COVID pandemic, we had data in January when it was just sort of getting started and didn't have too many effects in the United States. We see that the overall secure flourishing index is 6.8, and that it ranges from a high of 7.1 for mental and physical health to a low of 5.7 for financial and material stability. By June, when we're in the throes of the pandemic, we see some pretty significant declines for average scores. Happiness and mental and physical health fall, financial material stability fall. The overall index falls from 6.8 to 6.3, but character and virtue stays the same. So people are still pursuing the good life and trying to live virtuously and develop as good human beings. And close social relationships doesn't fall as much as we would expect, as people find other ways to connect, like this Zoom conference that we're having today. So we don't take at face value that these scores fully reflect the reality of individual flourishing, but it's a starting point for a conversation about where are the points of resilience within the experience of the COVID pandemic, and where might we want to focus attention in making some improvements. And again, these kinds of self-report scores are only as strong as the self-awareness of the people who are giving the scores. So that's an important conversation that we continue to have in the program. We have measured flourishing in a variety of settings around the world. And again, what we know is that this is the starting point for a conversation. Once you have sort of your own score and the average score, you can begin to have a conversation and ask questions about what it means. One thing that we note in some work that's ongoing at a private US high school is that the flourishing scores for students in some domains tend to be a bit higher than for staff. And sometimes with schools, the emphasis is on the student. And how can we promote the flourishing of teachers and staff while we're also promoting the flourishing of students? So again, it's a conversation starter. We have pointed out, and this is from Tyler's paper in the International Journal of Community Wellbeing, that there are objective and subjective elements to flourishing. We can measure your own sort of subjective experience, but we could also look at things like mortality, life expectancy, and more objective measures. And we also need to measure the individual flourishing and the flourishing of the group. And by community, we could mean a school or a church or a government organization or a neighborhood or a state or a nation or something, you know, even broader than that. So community can mean lots of different things. And again, we can measure community subjective well-being through the experiences of community members, assessing the community rather than themselves. And also we can get more official data or objective data. So we've measured community well-being in a few communities, including this private high school. And we noticed that good relationships for students in their personal lives are much stronger than their perception of good relationships within the school. And the score is even lower for teachers and staff. So it's important for us to start a conversation when we see a finding like this. What is it that is accounting for the fact that people say, well, my own personal relationships are pretty good, but the relationships in this community are not as good? And one of the items that we have found in a few settings now to be very important in this first domain of good relationships is trust. And we know that there's a global decline in trust in social institutions of all kinds. And so trust seems to be something that we might want to have further conversation about. And we can spend more time on this during the questions. I know my time is almost up. So when we look at flourishing, we can start with an observable event. This is the systems thinking iceberg some of you may have seen. So we can take a thriving individual teen or maybe a suffering teen as our observable event, and we can dig below the surface and notice that there are certain patterns of behavior that are shaping the ability of this individual teen to thrive. And this comes from the book Connected by Christakis and Fowler. I've got the cover here on this slide. And they point out that your friends' who you may not have even ever met are playing an important role in your ability to find happiness and to thrive and have well-being in various ways. So we can become more aware of the ripple effects of these relationships. And digging even deeper, we can ask, are the structures in our communities, whether they're schools or whether they're neighborhoods, are they organized for flourishing? Do they promote the 5 domains and the financial and material stability necessary to maintain those domains? And then we can ask even more deeply, what's the mental model that contributes to the way that our groups are structured and the cultures that we find within these groups? What is a person in an ontological sense, in the sense of who they really are, what their sort of nature of their being is, and how do our organizations and social systems treat persons? Okay, I realize I'm running a little bit short, so let's skip to the next one. And I'll just say that here's a couple of other books that I've found helpful. One is this book, Motivation in Organizations, where we can look at sort of lower level motivations, useful goods in sort of Aristotle's framework. But we can also begin to look at higher motivations, pleasant goods, moral goods, and spiritual goods. And oftentimes our conversations about well-being and flourishing are focused on the lower level motivation. So we're trying to expand that. And then this other circle image here is showing us that we can relate to ourselves in disconnected ways or more connected ways. We can relate to others more or less disconnectedly. Same with groups, same with nature, and same with spirit or transcendent source of creativity, whatever language is comfortable for folks. People who flourish the best are relating very well in all 5 of these relationships and connecting with deeper motivation. So that's one one point. To what extent are we engaging with the full range of motivations and relationships in our lives and in the lives we serve? I think we can go to the last slide. So again, I'll put in the chat some other resources, but we have a blog at Psychology Today. We have a web-based app that will soon be available on the Google and Apple platforms, so that you can self-assess your own individual flourishing and then do some activities to improve it. We have the community of practice. Anyone would be welcome to join the large group meeting, and then we have some working group meetings. And out of the community of practice has developed this Education for Flourishing Consortium at St. Louis University and the Teacher Education for Flourishing Collaborative at Notre Dame. And the other thing that I'll put in the chat box is a link to the adolescent version of our Flourishing Index. I think that's it. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Jonine now.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I'm so excited that you were able to join me on this wonderful flourishing information. It is just a game changer, absolutely a game changer. And so I would like to transition a little bit here with all of this incredible language, all of this incredible science of how do we infuse this information, these Harvard Human Flourishing domains, to what we're doing on the ground. How do we operationalize all of these ways to help young people flourish? And again, I'm just going to repeat the 6 domains of human flourishing that Dr. Lee mentioned: happiness and life satisfaction, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, close social relationships, financial and material security, which is a way to sustain the first 5. So let me go. And this is a study that I actually fell upon when I was writing my grant. And I was so amazed by it. I was able to call and get involved in this consortium, this community of practice that Dr. Lee is talking about. And I would advise anybody who's interested to get on these phone calls or these Zoom calls, because they're so informative about what is happening. And one of the things that one of the outcomes of these meetings is to infuse human flourishing, not only in education, but also in public policy, in mental health, or public health. One of the things that is happening right now is we are working with the military on human flourishing because of our marriage grant that we have in our office at the Center for Relationship Education, which comes out of the Office of Family Assistance and marriage strengthening, family strengthening strategies. First of all, one of the things that I'm actually going to put my timer on because I want to make sure that I stay true to my time. One of the things that I wanted to share with you is that we all seem to live in silos. Even if we look at grants that are funded through different foundations or different federal offices or different public health spaces, they're all kind of siloed. And we have teen pregnancy prevention, we have bullying prevention or violence prevention, we have mental health, reduction of suicide ideation, reduction of depression. And if we look at these in its togetherness, in the totality of what we're trying to solve, one of the things that's common to all of those things is disconnection. So if I can go to the next slide, and this is kind of a funky slide. So it shows all of these disconnects: substance abuse, teen pregnancy, suicide, poverty, bullying, violence, high turnover rates in business and in the industry, divorce. And all of these things seem to have at its core a disconnection. The quality of the relationships in these kind of systems seem to not have the quality that they're talking about in the human flourishing domains. So if we could go down to the next slide, at the root cause of all of these things is disconnection or misconnection. And let me just define my terms here, because we could talk to young people about disconnection and they understand that, because they're disconnected from their classmates, they're disconnected from their family members, perhaps, they're disconnected from the community, their neighbors, their grandparents, all of those things. But sometimes they don't understand the word misconnection. And misconnection is defined what they are in relationships, but those relationships are unhealthy. And at the Center for Relationship Education, we partner with the University of Denver, and their researchers have been so active in outlining the data about what makes relationships work and what makes relationships fail. What are those key components? What are those? What is it? How do we operationalize healthy relationships? And in fact, it's so funny because I wish I would have had this information when I was developing relationships back, in my early teen years and my 20s, as I was getting married and all of those things, having children, because this is how I did relationships. And I'm sure some of you on the Zoom call could relate to this. Hi, I think you're cute. I like your car. I think your mother likes me. That's kind of how I did relationships. And when I talk to my friends who are a similar age, they can really relate to that. But when I see the skill level that it takes to have healthy relationships, I thought, wow, I really wish I would have had these skills. And in fact, when we train teachers at our office, that's what they say. They say, I came for my students, but this is really for me, because it's ageless. Healthy relationship skills are ageless in many domains, not in just in adolescence and schools, but in the corporate world, in the military, in marriage, in divorce recovery, in all kinds of in first responders, law enforcement. All of these places need to have healthy relationship skills at the root. So let's talk a little bit about what types of relationships affect our lives. And we go to the first kind of relationship is family. And one of the things that I think all of us should be doing is really trying to work with family members, with parents. Parents are the primary educators of their children. And if we could really work with the entire family system with their children and build that trust and that bonding and teach them together, teaching them these skills together so they get reinforced. And so we have family members and the family relationships. And the next kind of relationship, we can go to the next slide, is of course friendships. And the next kind of relationship we have on the next slide is romantic partners. And then the final one we would go to is coworkers, or in the instance of adolescence, it would be classmates. And I would like to add one more to this, because we're finding that with the work that we do, that the young people love learning about themselves. So I would say your relationship with yourself. We need to learn about our relationship with ourselves, the relationship with our family, the relationship with our friends, romantic partners, and classmates. And when you think about the teen pregnancy prevention or even sex ed, we kind of got out of the sex ed wars because relationships are healthy relationships are the antecedent to teen pregnancy prevention. If we could really concentrate on relationship development and what is healthy and what is unhealthy and what is satisfying and what is high quality and what does close mean, we can operationalize those words. We really can make a huge difference in the behavior of our young people, especially as we deal with issues of the heart. And if you notice on this, even if I have 5 here, adding ourselves and others, romance is only one of 5 different types of relationships. So if we continue with the next slide, my question usually is to educators and to those we train is, first of all, when some of these relationships do go sideways, and they do. I mean, they go sideways, we have an argument or something happens and there's stress, trauma, and hurt, what do we do? And we have kind of done a lot of focus groups with lots of different people, and we hear these next, if you go to the next slide, this is what people do. They turn to alcohol, glass of wine, drugs, pleasure-seeking behavior and sexual activity, bullying. Somebody hurts you, you're going to kick the dog, let's say, which is, you're a dog lover. I don't even like to hear those words. But basically, I hardly ever hear in our focus groups, you know what I'm going to do? If I deal with stress, trauma, and hurt, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to listen to music and calm down. I'm going to be out in nature, maybe go for a picnic. There's not a lot, when we deal with stress, trauma, and hurt, people don't actually go to those places of healthy coping mechanisms. They go to alcohol, drugs, sex, and bullying or pleasure-seeking behaviors. And so if we go to the next slide, I would say that all communities are at risk. Of course, we want to work mostly with our vulnerable communities, but I would say in Colorado has a huge teen suicide rate. We're number 9 in the country. It breaks my heart. With all our sunshine, all our parks, all our outdoor activities, and we're finding that teen suicide happens in highly resourced communities, not in the poor communities. What's going on here? We have to really kind of look at these things and try to figure out how to bring those domains into these at-risk population groups. I'm sure many of you on this call have heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, but I can tell you that if you haven't, we don't have time to look at this video, but this resource, this video resource that with this particular link is on YouTube. It is an incredible 5-minute video that talks about the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And when you see how adverse experiences affect our health, as a public health nurse, this is so crazy because we have to address this issue. And when you understand, you'll see that the Adverse Childhood Experiences has a questionnaire. And every single one of the 10 questions in the 10-question questionnaire has to do with relationships, with the quality of your relationships growing up. And when you understand those young people who have high levels of ACE scores above a 4, that's what the research is telling us, above a 4, you find that you need to start changing your language. Instead of saying to a child, what is wrong with you if they make some bonehead move, your now language says, what happened to you? It's a place of the heart. It's a place of compassion. It's a place of understanding that there was some adverse childhood experiences that need healing, that need attention, that need to be nurtured and for flourishing to happen. So this is the science of abundance, if you will. Dr. Lee had mentioned the book, The Science of Abundance, and it talks about that in here. And also Dr. Anda from this study says, what is predictable is preventable. If we could predict what kind of ACE scores a child might have had, then we could prevent it and we could help them heal from these adverse childhood experiences. So please, I implore you to, when you get this video or to get these slides, to go to that video of the adverse childhood experiences. It will change your community of practice. Another question, and actually I was on the call with Dr. Lee this morning. There was another call this morning from the Human Flourishing Community of Practice. And Dr. Lee kind of walks his talk. He starts his meetings with, if all of you can put one word in the chat box of how you're feeling. I love that. Wouldn't that be a great way to start a class? Put one word in a chat box. Tell me how you're doing. What makes you happy? What made you happy today? Another question he talked about today is, what lights you up? And isn't that just a great way to start a class? This resource is also from Harvard. It's the YouTube Harvard Happiness Study. It's a 75-year longitudinal study. It's the longest longitudinal study ever done. And actually, it's an incredibly entertaining video. I call it edutainment. And what Dr. Robert Waldiger does is he takes you through all these studies, the 75 years, and the outcome of the 75 years is the biggest predictor of health and happiness is the quality of your social relationships. How amazing. So that's why in our work, we just stay in the relationship space. So here are some of the benefits, the research-based benefits, and all of these are on links that you can go to and read this. But the benefits, the personal benefits, the family benefits, there's community benefits. And the community benefits are healthy communities are a result of healthy connections. Communities with strong social supports experience less violence and poverty. That's what the research tells us. Also, in regard to you don't see the family one, but the CDC has a family structure study that talks about children do best in every measurable component of their lives when they live within the structure of a married two-parent healthy family. And this particular study is available, and it's 86,000 was the N number. They studied 86,000 families. So this is amazing data. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about school and work. Those children who experience healthy relationships are less likely to drop out of school, and they maintain better performance in academic pursuits. Teachers want to know that. We get welcomed into schools all the time because we say, how would you like your kids to do better in school? Well, if we can teach healthy relationships, kids do better in school. And I'll talk a little bit about that from the Search Institute has a new piece of literature out that I want you to know about. The healthy relationships in the workplace create an environment with limited turnover. We were asked to go into the corporate world to reduce turnover rates. So because we can quantify, we have the research to quantify how much an employer loses when they lose an employee. We know that it's about $35,000. So they are the corporate world is very interested in having us come in and do relationship workshops in the workplace, which is an amazing turn of events for us. And then in your finances, financial stress is a leading cause of conflict. Many studies demonstrate a strong correlation between healthy, committed relationships and wealth accumulation. One of the things that we all want to do is we all want to make sure that there's this economic equality. It breaks my heart that we have some living in highly resourced schools and highly resourced communities and others living in places where they don't have enough resources. So we need to make sure that through healthy relationship development and we can build wealth and help those communities have the financial security they need to live free and have those domains that we talked about. And then finally, people in healthy relationships enjoy lower stress, better physical health, more contentment, and longer lives. And this comes out of a Stanford study that I have I have another piece of literature for you to look at here. I just want to show you how we can really infuse this. Now that we know why we're doing what we're doing, and let me just tell you what the why is. Building those protective factors, building those antecedents of healthy relationships so that we can get to the outcomes we're looking for of lower teen pregnancy, lower sexual activity, lower STDs, more kids graduating. Those are the antecedents of kids doing better and flourishing. So we're going to infuse the 6 domains of human flourishing and relationship development skills into SRA programming for optimal health. First of all, let's go to domain number 1, happiness and life satisfaction. Create SRA curricula objectives to teach toward discovering happiness and life satisfaction by 1, making a plan for success, helping kids see their positive future. Some kids don't see a positive future. And so we need to help them map a future. We need to break it down and reduce it to the ridiculous and give them, objectives. And even if it's starting with organizing your locker or bringing pencils and pens to school so that you asking questions, student engagement is incredibly important. And the next bullet is, what do I need to do to, next bullet. Yeah, thank you. What do I need to do to move towards my goals today? What do I need to do today? What do I need to do tomorrow? What do I need to do the next day? Don't make it so far out that they can't see it. So make it so that they can see it, and success breeds success. And let me tell you what that means. If somebody is obese, at the health department, we don't tell them you need to lose 50 pounds. We tell them, can you lose 2 by next week or next month? Because if they lose 2 and are successful at losing 2, they're much more likely to be successful at losing 3 or 4 or 5. Same thing happens with moving towards my goals. Success breeds success. And then what are the principles guiding my life? What do I value? What do I wonder about? What makes me curious? What would make me engaged? And this morning we heard from a gentleman in Massachusetts who talked about engaging the head, the heart, and the hands, and making it experiential, making all of your activities movement and making them meaningful, making them heartfelt, because just giving them information doesn't change behavior. We know that. But if you help them to integrate their head, the information, their heart, what does it mean to me? And getting them engaged in, what do I wonder about? What am I curious about? What do I want? What are things that guide my life? What lights me up, if you will? Domain number 2 is mental and physical health. So create SRA curricula objectives, teach toward discovering mental and physical health. Why am I important? And dignity, value, and worth. Every single child, no matter where they come from, culturally, sexually orientation, no matter what, inclusion is so important for every single child. Why are they important? Why do they matter? Why do they have high levels of dignity, value, and worth? How they are high-hanging fruit at the top of a tree. We need to make sure that every single child feels that in our programming. What are they good at? What lights their fire? What are they passionate about? What do they daydream about? What would they do without getting paid? Those are some of the questions we ask. And putting it all together. Who am I? What's my personality? What's my love language? What's my birth order? All of those things, kids love that. They can't get enough of it. So they love learning about themselves. And so that's part of the mental and physical health domain. Okay, let's go to domain number 3, is meaning and purpose. And we have to create objectives to teach toward discovering meaning and purpose. Finding themselves in the world. One of the questions we ask young people in an activity that we do is, what are you doing today to make your world a better place? And some kids really struggle with that. And then we give them some ideas of things they can do to make their world a better place. Just a little story about this is a young girl came to us and said, you know what I do, Miss McKenzie? I am in the bathroom in a public place and I see some paper on the floor in my little stall, and I pick it up and put it in the commode so that the next person coming in doesn't have to be in a dirty stall. And I thought, oh my goodness, that makes people feel good. That's a feel good activity. And she said, and of course I wash my hands really good when I come out of the stall, but I feel really good about that next person going into the stall. That is just a little thing. Doesn't cost any money, but it helps her discover what she can do for the world. Going towards the future, building confidence, building self-efficacy, building those skills, knowledge, and intentions to do things that are good for the world. So that's just a little, I know that these are very, very short and very truncated, but I want to share with you that these are so important to put these, to inculcate these as protective factors in your curriculum. Character and virtue. So what would you do with character and virtue? Ask the question, what kind of character traits do I want to have and build? And so we have to talk about character education. We have to talk about universal character traits: honesty, integrity, patience, kindness. I really hate anti-bullying programs. I don't want anything anti. I want to see pro-kindness. What kind of things will enhance my character? What kind of things will take away from my character? Martin Luther King talked about the content of our character. So important. Leading with integrity. And also knowing what your vulnerabilities are. What temptations do you have that make you vulnerable? And what kind of support systems do you need to help you stay away from those temptations? And so those are the kind of things that we talk about in the classes that we do. But you can inculcate these kind of questions into your programming. Is close social relationships, and this is our sweet spot, of course, in the Center for Relationship Education, exploring close connections. What do close connections look like? What do they feel like? What defines them? One of the things we talk about, one of the things that we know from the research is the number one cause of relationship dissolution, according to the research, is the inability to work through conflict. What a gift to give a young adolescent skills to work through conflict. We spend a lot of time on teaching them how to have the speaker-listener technique. It's based on the Native American talking stick, that if you have the stick, you're the only one that's allowed to talk, and then you willingly give the stick to somebody else, and you need to listen to what they say, and then you need to paraphrase what they said back to you until that person knows that you heard them. So those are the kind of things that we teach in regard to decision making and healthy communication and stages of attachment, building strong bonds, making the condition of the soil that Dr. Lee talked about so rich that healthy relationships naturally follow. And we also talk about the components of a healthy relationship, but not only talk about it, we actually operationalize it. And how do you do it? What are the skills does it take to have these healthy relationships and these committed relationships into your, as family formation as you get older? This particular resource, and it'll be available to you, comes from the Search Institute. The Search Institute is famous for the 40 developmental assets. A lot of you know those 40 developmental assets. It's a positive youth development program. And I just want to let you know that this is available. This is a 10-year research project from the Search Institute. It's creating connections that help young people thrive. They call these developmental relationships. And if a young person feels close their family, close to their classmates, and close to their community, they do better in school. So this is a great thing to have as a resource to bring into your schools so that they allow you to come in and you can really do a school saturation approach to healthy relationship development and build those protective factors in the youth in those schools. So I really want you to have that, this piece of literature, and we'll tell you how to get this. And then finally, the last, financial and material stability. We want to reduce poverty among many of those young people who are currently in poverty. We want to get them out of that cycle. We talk about the success sequence. We talk about all of the things around, the healthy relationship and what does it take to have to do life in order. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby. We used to sing that jingle. Dick and Jane sitting in a tree, K-I-S. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby. We seem to have lost that. And it's not just teenagers, it's the adults around them as well. So that's why, the government is, putting money into the marriage grants, the fatherhood grants, and building healthy connections because it's so integral to our health. In summary, here's my question, and here's what you ask your teachers, your principals, your legislators, anybody, your county commissioners, your HHS directors, your health department. Don't we want all students to thrive and flourish? And then let's all work together to infuse the domains of human flourishing and relationship development that touch the heart of the human condition into your programming. And I just thank you so much for being on this call. I'm humbled and delighted to be with you.
Thank you very much, Jonine. Unfortunately, we are right out of time, and there will not be any time for questions and answers. But if you could put your questions in the chat, we will try to see if we can get those answers for you. So I don't know if the chat is not working for you. We will be looking for that. We're looking to work on that. Megan, can you comment on the chat functionality right now?
If you don't see the chat box located on your screen, it's on your toolbar that I mentioned at the beginning of the session. It may be hidden, you kind of have to scroll over it, but then you'll also have the opportunity to submit, on the survey at the end of the day, there should be a section for additional comments, questions, concerns. And so, however you need to get in contact with us, we'd love to take those questions and be able to help.
Okay, we apologize. And there are someone has asked here quickly, what is the exchange? It's an excellent resource. And someone has put the link to that up, and you can find just a multitude of resources. And this particular presentation will be on the exchange, and you can access it, and you can access some of the links that people have been asking for. So with that, Megan, I will turn it over to you in the interest of time.
Thank you, Marianne. And with that, we will close out this session. Thank you.